Coming up this episode, I'm joined by Andrew Wood and Rajeev Narayan. We're talking about community solar and the joy of charging your electric vehicle with sunshine. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to episode 114 of the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and interviews with industry experts. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with Andrew and Rajeev, and I'm very confident that you will as well. There's nothing better than being able to charge your electric vehicle with solar power, and I actually learned a lot about community solar, which is very different from just putting solar panels on your roof. Before we get started, though, I want to remind you to like the video, subscribe to the EV Resource channel, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future video uploads. So without further ado, let's dive in. Here's Andrew and Rajeev. Rajeev and Andrew, thank you so much for taking some time to join me. I think we're going to have a really awesome conversation about EVs and solar and the natural overlap between the two technologies because, as Rajeev will probably share with us, there isn't much better than being able to charge an electric vehicle with the sunlight. I mean, that's just... It sounds like magic, but I'm sure we're going to kind of dive in and explain a little bit of why it's not magic. It's just something that makes perfect sense once you kind of know how it works. I do want to give you guys the opportunity to introduce yourselves. Rajeev, if you want to start, and then Andrew after he's finished.
Awesome. Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This is a really cool opportunity, so thanks so much. My name's Rajeev Narayan. I don't work in the EV or solar industry at all. I'm just a regular guy here in San Antonio who enjoys driving on sunshine. It's an amazing feeling, and I drive a lot. I'm a local physician, and I drive about 80 miles a day, all electric. And I've worked on, getting solar both on my roof and also something called community solar, which has been awesome, and it has been a game changer, and I've gotten a few other friends to get on the bandwagon with that, and it's both saved me money and made me feel good about things, and especially right now with the gas prices being as crazy as they are, it's been great. My family now has 3 electric vehicles, and I have about 17 kilowatts of community solar and about 8.1 kilowatts of rooftop, and it's been great.
Wow. So Rajeev, we're just going to ask you all the questions because you've got experience. That makes perfect sense. And Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to be on. So I'm in San Antonio. I am the vice president of sales operations for a company called Big Sun Solar. I've been in the solar industry for 13 years now. Really, that's sort of the length of the industry in San Antonio. So actually, I came to San Antonio to study environmental science at UTSA. And during my, I think it was sophomore year, I was just looking for opportunities to get into renewable energy and stumbled across this nonprofit that was called Solar San Antonio. And my first assignment there was to document all the solar installations in San Antonio. That was a total of 39 installations.
So, that's it.
It didn't take me very long.
Well, you did say 13 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. So 13 years ago, there were 39 installations in San Antonio. Now there's probably 25,000, 30,000 rooftop installations and carport installations. So, I mean, it's just boomed over the past couple of years. So I've been fortunate to see all different sides of the industry, from the nonprofit advocacy world to residential to now commercial and utility scale with our community solar program.
So I have to ask right out of the gate here, explain community solar. What is that? How does it work? Because I know my knowledge about that is quite limited, and I can only assume that there's a lot of people that might have heard those two words put together and went, what? So
Sure.
What is it? How does it work?
Yeah, there's a couple different variations of it. So I'll sort of hit on the two most common ones. So really you can equate it to a community garden, where you might have a garden in a neighborhood and everyone works together. They sort of go and pick the vegetables, right? So it's just one centralized location for a garden instead of having it spread out. So community solar in general is, let's say, a field of solar panels on the outskirts of town, where you may have a 1 megawatt, 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt solar array. And then members of the community can actually buy solar panels within that larger array. So they're, in that case, that's what our community solar program was. It was what we deem private ownership. Rajeev is one of our customers. He was one of the first customers in the program. So he actually owns solar panels that are not located on his property, right? So
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
Pretty interesting concept. We switched it up just a little bit. So instead of doing a big field on the outskirts of town, we actually brought it back into the community. So what we do is we build these large scale solar carports throughout the city. So they may be at car dealerships or office space, large carports. Then people like Rajeev can buy solar panels within those carports. We sell all of the electricity back to the utility company, and then the owner gets a credit on their utility bill every month for the
There we
next
go.
5 years.
That answered the question I hadn't asked yet was, okay, how does somebody benefit then if they own part of a solar panel?
Right.
That's how it works. So you buy it or sell it to the utility and then credit back to the owner.
That's right.
Rajeev, typically, I mean, with the solar that's on your house and that, how does that translate to how it affects your usual electricity bill?
So for my bill in particular, it's helped quite a bit. In fact, if I add up what I have from rooftop solar and I add up what I get from community solar, it reduced my bill from what would be $250 to $300 an hour, dollars a month, down to like 53.
Wow. So quite
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that you have 3 EVs. So of course, charging those,
Yep.
your bill would probably be higher than a lot of people that might not have an EV at all.
Much higher. About 40 to 50% of my bill is charging my EVs. And that's because we drive about 140 electric miles a day on average.
Oh, wow.
Between myself and the rest of the family. So we drive
That's a decent amount. Yeah.
A ton. Yep. And so we have a Model Y and a Chevy Bolt and a Chevy Volt, of which, most of the miles are electric. And so, other than the Tesla, the other two are not necessarily the most efficient in terms of miles per kilowatt hour. But it's been huge. The community solar has been awesome. What I personally like about it, especially when I talk to other folks about it, is if you move in the local area, the credits go with you.
Oh, that's great.
So,
of course, if you move to a house that doesn't have solar from one that did, well, now you're back to square one.
Right.
But community solar, it doesn't change. Oh,
Perfect
that's great.
example. 2012, I bought my first house and installed solar on it. And then about 4 years later, I decided to get a bigger house and move. I just lost my solar panels.
Right.
The community solar now is a great option to where it travels with you.
So I gotta ask. The community solar is not something that is very widespread. I haven't really heard of or seen that, at least here in Virginia. Are there certain states where that's not even possible? Or is that like a Texas only thing? Do you think that's something that we will see kind of an acceleration of adoption across the United States? Or if there's something that's preventing that, what would be the hurdles that are in the way?
Yeah, great question. It's really starting to boom, I would say, within the last 2 to 3 years. The Northeast actually has a ton of community solar projects. It really depends on the utility company in that area, right? So we're in Texas. Most of the state is deregulated, which means you have one company for the transmission and distribution lines, and then you've got retail energy providers that actually sell you the electricity.
Mm-hmm.
In those areas, it's really hard to get a community solar program off the ground because it's who's benefiting from it. Nobody wants to put up the upfront capital. In In the regulated markets like San Antonio, we have a municipally owned utility company, CPS Energy. And so they've actually done 2 community solar projects. They did a 1 megawatt project in 2015, and then our Big Sun community solar project, which was 5 megawatts in 2018. So they're looking to do more community solar. So they're definitely into it. There are some challenges with, you have to find the land to do it, whether that's parking lots like we did or 65 acres of land. You have to be able to have that land available and a utility company to buy the power.
Sure. And you don't have to have one large like solar farm. I mean, is that something where you could almost have 10 different smaller locations and then kind of just combine them together? I mean, I'm coming from a place of ignorance, so if I'm not asking the right question, let me know. But I mean, is there a way that you can almost decentralize the actual physical location of the solar panels?
That's weird, Zach. It's like you know our business model. That's exactly what we did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so we have 12 different locations spread throughout the city, and different parking lots throughout the city. Mm-hmm. So if you aggregate those 12 locations together, it equals 5 megawatts, which is the community solar program.
Very cool. Very cool. So most of the country is regulated. I think, Texas, it is one of the rarer situations. Do you think that there is a lot of opportunity in the places that are regulated, maybe electrical providers that aren't actively pursuing that type of thing? Do you think there's opportunity there? And then if so, what would your recommendations be if somebody's listening to this, that they can talk to their electricity provider and say, hey, this is something I'd like to see more of? How do they kind of start that process? Do you have any recommendations for people that are like, oh, I want to do that? And then like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I apologize, I'm not extremely knowledgeable on the rest of the country as far as the community solar programs and
that's fine,
how they get off the ground. But I will say a lot of them are subscription based. So what'll happen is a community solar company will build a big solar farm and you subscribe to the output. So with that, you actually have 2 separate bills. So it's not actually integrated with the energy company themselves. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, you're paying the energy company what you would normally pay them. And then you're also a community solar member where you get that discount, or you pay slightly more in some cases for community solar.
Right.
So sometimes it's sort of separated. As far as how do you get it off the ground? Rajeev, do you have any guidance?
You just have
that?
to nag these utility companies if they're willing enough. Maybe they'll do something. One of the things I did notice is that my community solar, my rooftop solar panels produce about 80% of what the community solar panels do watt for watt. And part of that I think has to do with the fact that even though I technically own, say, 48 panels, what I'm getting is the average output of the entire 5 megawatt installation that's San Antonio wide. So if there's a cloud here or a cloud there, the amount that it affects you is minimal. And also, I guess maybe roof angle, I'm not really sure. One of the questions I was wondering for Andrew was, because the panels are just pretty standard panels. Why are the community solar panels so much more productive panel for panel or watt for watt than typical rooftop? Is it just roof angle, or is it efficiencies with the inverter? You've got the right amount of inverter for the right number of panels, or you've got enough. You reach an output earlier in the day that's going to turn on the inverter, unlike my rooftop, which waits a while because the installation is small, or what?
Yeah. There's a couple different variables that go into it. One is, as you said, the roof pitch. So whenever you install solar, ideally you want to do it at the latitude where you are. So in San Antonio, we're about 30 degrees latitude. Okay. So ideally you want the panels pitched at 30 degrees. Most of the time that's not possible. Community solar, the way we did it, unfortunately, we had to pitch it at 6 degrees because we were building carports. So if you pitch it at 30 degrees, then that'd be a funny looking carport, right? So a lot of the times you can get a better angle, better pitch on the rooftops, but orientation plays a big part too. So we can pick parking lots that are facing south or west to get the best production, to sort of maximize the production throughout the day. And then also we're on the hook to maintain your solar panels, right? So we're out there cleaning Rajiv's solar panels while he's sitting at home. I mean, clearly you're at work right now. But.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So basically, you guys have a lot more flexibility in terms of orientation and the design of the array, where if somebody's putting it on their roof, that's a fixed roof. It can't be adjusted. So there's very little chance that it's going to be ideal unless they happen to have been building their house with solar in mind.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And then you've got shading issues. A lot of times in residential areas, you've got big trees which may shade the solar panels for a couple hours per day. I don't know about your house whether you have shade or not, but that could be
not a lot, but
yeah.
some.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think that going forward, as solar becomes more and more ubiquitous, that, you know, moving more towards like a community solar type of predominance would be better than just all of us throwing panels on our roofs?
Yes and no. I'm biased, right? Because I'm in that industry. We don't do residential installation, so I'd love to see the transition towards community solar. But I think there's benefits to both, right? When you put it on your house, you're producing electricity that you're actually consuming in your house. Whereas in my house, I don't have any panels on the roof. I have community solar only. So my panels are producing electricity 20 miles away from me, right? So I'm not actually consuming that electricity in my physical house. It's just offsetting the carbon and lowering my energy bill, right? So there's pros and cons of both. I think moving forward, utilities could be much smarter about how they do sort of residential rooftop solar. So if a utility is giving somebody a rebate to go solar, why not sort of buy their inverter for them, or give them the rebate with the stipulations that the utility company can control that inverter and monitor that inverter. They could get much more data to see exactly when they're producing, when these residential systems are producing, because right now they don't have a lot of insight into that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, and actually brings to mind, and I don't know why I didn't think of it, here in Richmond, or Virginia, really all of Virginia, we have Dominion Power, and they have their green power program where I have subscribed to this particular plan that every kilowatt hour of electricity that I use, it might not be specifically generated by solar, but they will purchase solar or biomass or wind, renewable energy equal to what I'm using to offset that.
Right.
So it sounds like it's, I mean, obviously not exact, but it sounds like there's some similarities there, that the actual electrons are whatever the grid happens to be using. It's just yours, as Big Sun Community Solar, you guys are then selling that electricity to the electricity provider. So it kind of gets then put into the mixing bowl.
Yeah, that's very true. Do you pay a premium for your green power program?
A little bit, but
right. That's one of the things I've never understood, because in my opinion, the utilities don't have to make you pay. Yeah, it should be cheaper, right?
Right. Well, and they're going to buy the power anyway. They're buying the power anyway. At least here in Texas, they're going to buy a ton of wind power from West Texas. And now they're saying, hey, we'll charge you a little more, and we'll say that all your power came from wind or solar. Yep. When they're not changing the mix of their power purchasing agreement at all.
It's a brilliant marketing plan.
Makes you feel good, though.
Well, but that's the thing. I did it because I'm like, well, I'm a huge advocate for, renewable energy and of course electric vehicles. So it was more of a, hey, I can't put solar on my house, so I want to put my money where my mouth is.
Right.
I think if I had the opportunity for community solar, that would be the answer to everything that I personally am missing when it comes to electricity for the house, because I'm unable to. I mean, I've got too many trees, the house isn't facing the right way, and I'm renting. So it's like there's no way I can just suddenly put solar panels up. But a community solar project where it could be, 10 miles down the road, that would absolutely be something that I can't see any reason why it wouldn't work.
Right.
And I'll have to talk to Dominion about it, because I've never known or thought to ask. So that's cool, especially seeing as I have EVs. I mean, the idea that you can charge very, very inexpensively, if that's the right word, charging with solar or wind when you have an EV, it's just, that breaks so many of the things that people say. Oh, your EV is coal powered, right? You can be like, well, actually,
Right.
And Andrew, you just got a new EV, so I definitely want to transition the conversation a little bit more towards electric vehicles. And then we can kind of tie it all into solar and EVs and all of that, and maybe talk solar EVs too, because that's cool. But what did you get, if you're willing to share? And
Of course.
you're May in, so initial impressions, and then
Exactly.
I do have a very specific question. If you're excited about the idea of charging using the sun.
Of course. Yeah. That was one of the main factors. I've got free electricity essentially. So now I don't have to stop at the gas stations. It's great. No, but I'm sort of day 2 EV owner. So by no means am I an expert on EVs, far from it. So I'm happy to hear what you guys have to say on this. But I just took possession of a Ford Lightning. So year and a half in the making. I guess I probably put my reservation in whenever they launched. I think that was maybe May 2021.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, ordered it January 2022, and then it finally arrived at the dealership. So went and picked it up yesterday. Fantastic vehicle. This is the best vehicle I've ever owned. Day 2 into it. So yeah, I love it. One thing I want to ask is, does that instant acceleration ever get old?
No, it's awesome.
No.
It's awesome.
Now, saying that, I mean, a little background for perspective. I am a car guy. That instant acceleration, the power and torque behind an electric motor, is one of the reasons, aside from saving money, that I went EV. I have never gotten over it, and what I've found, however, is I find myself wanting even more after a while. And it's like 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. My entire life, that would have been the most amazing thing. And now I'm like, okay, yeah, I want more. I want faster. Now, your truck, I mean, that'll do 0 to 60 a little bit quicker than 5 seconds.
I think they say 4.5, and
yeah,
I've tested it out quite a few times, and I would agree with that.
So I can't be there in person to coordinate, but I'm sensing a drag race between the Model Y and the Lightning, because they should be fairly evenly matched.
Nice.
In terms of 0 to 60.
Well, we'll have to try. We'll have to try. I'll welcome that. Yeah.
That's right.
But I have the Model Y long range. I don't have the performance, but it's still supposed to be like
I think it's 4.5
or something.
Well, that's good.
Something
I've
like
got the
that.
standard range, so it'll even us out.
Oh, okay. That's good though. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
I've driven trucks.
This is pickup truck country. So
Yeah. And I've driven trucks for, I don't know, probably 8 years now. And
There you go.
the whole reason I didn't have an EV so far was because I like driving a truck. So now that they finally made an EV that's a truck, I love it. Great.
So I'm curious, did you happen to consider the Rivian?
I didn't, no. At
Okay.
the time when I was doing this, we were installing solar at car dealerships throughout San Antonio. So we were doing 6 Cavender Auto Group car dealerships, and I saw they just purchased a Ford dealership, and I was like, oh, they got a Ford dealership. Let me go reserve a Lightning.
Sure.
So, yeah, I didn't consider the Rivian.
That's
Plus,
okay.
I think it's slightly smaller.
It
And
is.
we're in Texas, so we got to have big vehicles.
Everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Right. I've heard good things though.
Yeah, I've gotten a chance to drive it. I have not driven the F-150 Lightning yet. I've sat in it. I've seen it a couple times at like car shows.
Right.
Haven't driven it yet. It's on my bucket list for the year of EVs I'd like to drive. Here in Virginia, I think we're getting things a little bit later. So I know a few people that have taken delivery, but I have yet to see one actually on the road. So I'll probably freak out and like pull a U-turn and like chase them down. And it'll be like, who are you and what do you want?
Yeah, I haven't seen another one on the road yet. So
That's cool.
I'm interested to see how many start popping up.
So I know it's only been a day, but have people like stopped you to ask questions about it?
I've had a few like sort of pointing as I was driving. I did stop at Goodwill this morning to drop off some old clothes, and I pulled up in the drive-through lane and popped the frunk, and the guy goes, "What the hell?" Like he'd never seen it before. And then he went inside and got one of his buddies. He was like, "Come check this out." So it's an experience.
See, the experience that you have with your electric vehicle is going to be different in that way than I have with mine, or even Rajeev with his. We have EVs that either like the Teslas are so common now, it's kind of like, all right, whatever, there's another one.
Right.
Like, or with the Chevys, they're like, they're not like, they don't have this special allure to them, like some sort of magic, where the F-150 Lightning being a pickup truck with the massive frunk, I mean, it's just like, there are those things that people are going to really get excited about. Aside from owners, I don't know anybody that gets excited about, no offense, Rajeev, a Chevy Volt or a Bolt, or like I have a Chevy Spark EV. Like, people don't really care unless they're driving it and then they go, oh, wow.
Right.
But your experience, like, just to tell you a little bit of what you should expect, if you don't like attention, then you got the wrong vehicle, because you're gonna get a lot of attention. Be prepared to like take extra time throughout your journey or getting groceries, right, or whatever, to have like a half-hour conversation with somebody that they're gonna stop you and be like, hey, I'm so sorry, but I have so many questions.
And one of the things I do like about it though is it looks like a standard F-150 for the most part. There's only a few things that set it apart.
Yeah, the light bar on the front.
Right.
So
light
cool.
bar on the front and back. Yeah. So that I did like that about it, that it's not like a Cybertruck looking thing. Although that looks pretty cool, but
I will say, one of the reasons I got the Tesla was there you go. He's got his little Cybertruck. Are you a reservation holder?
Yes, but I'm not going to take delivery. Because personally, the truck made sense because I needed a vehicle that attracted a lot of attention for business purposes. Like, that's a good thing. But I actually, I ended up reserving a solar EV that has solar panels on it. The Aptera. It's a 3-wheeled 2-seater. Yeah. It looks like a freaking spaceship, which I love quirky, weird vehicles from a design aspect. But I like the idea of solar because, like I said, I can't have solar on my roof. So, the fact that I don't drive a whole lot now that I have a work van for my day job. And then, I typically just do a couple miles to go grocery shopping or pick up something or drive the kids to whatever. So it's like, I don't drive a whole lot. So if I have solar on the car, it might sit there 23 hours of the day. Well, of course, it's not getting sun all of that time, but you kind of get where I'm going with it. It's like, It can be sitting there absorbing sunlight. I expect that unless I'm going on a longer trip with that car, I may never need to plug it in. So
That's awesome.
I'm excited about that. Not that I would mind plugging it in if it were free, like if I had, free charging somewhere, I would do that. But the idea of potentially not having to plug a car in and just absorbing that energy directly is super exciting to me.
I've never heard of the Aptera. Is it?
So
When does it
they
come out?
currently, they finished their beta testing. They're currently in their gamma and delta phase. They plan on having production start, I believe, in a couple months to later this year for their 400-mile range version. Then they'll follow that with the 250-mile range version, which is the one that I ordered. So I'm expecting to take delivery middle to late of next year or 2024, depending on just how quickly they're able to ramp up. So it's not surprising you haven't heard of them because you'd never have seen one on the road.
Right.
The company has a really interesting history. They've been around for a while. Their first go wasn't entirely successful, and they kind of dissolved, and then the IP was sold off. But the original owners had the opportunity to repurchase all of that and kind of reboot. And I think the timing now is so much better than back in 2008, because the conversation about EVs, the idea is much more prevalent. And they actually announced this past week that they have more than 25,000 pre-orders. So I tend to put a little bit more weight on that number when they're saying that than like a million for the Cybertruck, because like putting down $100 on something, like there's a lot of excitement about the Cybertruck, but with the Aptera, it's such a very unique vehicle. There are no other vehicles like it in the marketplace that somebody can say, oh, I don't want the Aptera, and I'm going to go get this one instead. Like, if you had considered the Cybertruck or the Rivian, you could have said, okay, well, no, I'm going to go with the Ford, and that's the one that I want. Well, with Aptera, there isn't anything else. Like, the people that are putting down a deposit on that car, that want that car, they want that one.
Yeah. Is it a two-seater?
Two-seater, tons of storage in the back. It's going to have like a hatch that opens up. So I figure worst case scenario, I'll just like have some straps and tie my kids down back there.
They'll be fine.
I mean, it's fine, sure.
It uses like some Tesla parts, right?
Yeah, so they want to use Tesla's plug for charging. They've come out very openly praising Tesla for the design of their plug. It's smaller, it's much more efficient than like the big, bulky CCS connector that might have a cord that's an inch in diameter, that's heavy. With the Tesla connector, my kids can plug in our Tesla, so they're planning on using that. I don't know officially what other parts that they intend to use. I do know the battery cells themselves are going to be similar to what is in my Model 3 or your Model Y, the 2170 dimension cell.
Do you know if they're going to go with the induction motor with built-in inverter or permanent magnet like most other?
So I don't know. In fact, I would love to find that out more specifically. Their motors are going to be, my goodness, I forgot the company that makes them. They're in Europe. The same company, I believe, was providing the motors for the Lordstown Endurance. But they're hub motors, so they're in wheel.
Oh, okay.
They're not separate. So that I would assume is going
Probably
to be somewhat
magnet.
limiting in terms of the amount of weight that they want to put there, but then also the amount of space that they have to work with. I would expect them to be permanent magnet motors. I think for their application, that seems to be easier. But I don't actually know for sure. Did you get that?
What's the charging infrastructure for you where you guys are? Because for us here, it's a little sparse, and our driving distances are so long.
Yeah, I mean, Route 10 I think takes like 11 hours across the state. So yeah, it's
yeah, I think you can drive 880 miles or something in Texas and not leave the state.
That's
side to side.
That's incredible. I mean, I've been through Texas a few times, both driving as well as just flying in. And yeah, it's huge. I'm actually kind of surprised to hear that the infrastructure isn't really there. You would think that the demand for a proliferant, no, that's not the word I want. What is the word I want? Well, anyway, the demand for a large number of chargers, you would think that would be there. So I'm actually kind of shocked. Here in Virginia, the last 3 years have made a huge difference. 3 years ago, when I first got my Chevy Spark EV, there were 6 fast charging stations in Richmond. One of them was working. Like the others either didn't work with my car or just were broken and nobody was fixing them. Over the last 3 years, Electrify America and EVgo have come in, and EVgo has 1, 2, 3, 4 different locations around the metropolitan area, and then Electrify America has one that's right on the interstate because that's their business model. That has allowed me to leave Richmond with my Spark EV and go longer distances other places, because before there wasn't a charger that I could get to without charging on a level 2, and I just didn't want to do that for hours. So it's gotten a lot better, especially up in Northern Virginia. I mean, that's 90% of the EVs in this state are in Northern Virginia and down by the beach. You know, it's just up around DC, of course, that, you know, you have a lot of people that can afford $100,000 vehicles. So, you know, they're getting the Model S or the Model S Plaid, or, you know, some of these EVs that are much more expensive. When I got my Spark, I paid $11,500 for it because that's what I could afford. Wow. So it's like, you know, people are like, oh, EVs are expensive. I'm like, some are.
Some are.
Many are. But not all of them.
For us, unless you have a Tesla, charging infrastructure is a bit dicey if you're going to travel between cities. If you're local, it doesn't matter. You can charge at work or at home. But a lot of the chargers, as you point out, won't work, or they'll be a 50 kilowatt at the most.
Yeah, a lot of the older ones are going to be
some cars,
slower.
Rajeev, how often do you charge outside of your home?
Well, I charge at one of the hospitals for free, and then I just went to College Station and back, and I charged a couple of times at a supercharger. But 90% of my charging is going to be done at home, you know, and you don't have to charge every night, you know. And even when you use a supercharger, you know, the goal isn't to charge to full, you know, because you're paying usually 33 cents per kilowatt hour, 33 to 35 cents a kilowatt hour, when
That's
you're going to pay
generally average.
Yeah, a fraction of that at home, you know, usually on the order of 10, 11, 12 cents or so.
Right.
So you just want to charge enough on the supercharger to comfortably get back home or where you're going. You know, so that limits how long you have to be at the supercharger. But again, if you don't have a Tesla right now, we have these large mammoth gas station / stores called Buc-ee's all over Texas. And so we're hoping that they start putting in some superchargers, but
I believe they signed an agreement with Tesla recently.
Right, but we need them to put, non-denominational chargers, you know?
Right. Until Tesla opens up the supercharger network to be used by everybody, we need as many chargers that any vehicle can use as possible. And I think that's something that, whether you're in Texas or Virginia or anywhere really, I mean, even California, they have a massive infrastructure. The next couple of years are going to be really challenging when it comes to charging infrastructure. I firmly believe that the adoption of the vehicles is going to really accelerate, and the charging is going to be lagging behind it. So, you know, on holidays where people are driving mostly long distances, everybody's going to want to use a fast charger along the highway. And I really think we're going to see lines, people waiting, maybe fighting over their charging stalls, or, you know, cutting people off, human nature, typical human nature. I think we're going to see a lot of that. That is where I think when it comes to charging, that is one of the real focuses that needs to be made. But aside from that, not everybody lives in a home where they can plug in overnight. Andrew, I'm curious if you guys have explored the possibility of some of these places where you've built the solar canopies. Do they have level 2 chargers built in, into the like the parking lot or into the installation of what you guys are working with?
Yeah, so we actually did, out of the 12 community solar locations, I think 8 locations we put in level 2 chargers at.
Cool.
That was
the right answer.
Yeah. So,
Awesome.
and we really left that up to the building owner, because ultimately the building owner is going to be the one paying for that. So it was
Sure.
up to them whether they wanted to provide that amenity to their employees. But while we were trenching and laying conduits and doing electrical work, we did install at about 8 locations. So, and then some of them we did out of our own pocket. So I think at the end of the community solar program, I think we calculated we spent about $100,000 out of our own pocket to put EV chargers in, just because we want people to be able to charge from the solar, right?
Sure.
So we want to have that amenity. So it was just something we did to sort of give back to the city, to try and get more chargers around.
And Rajeev, I know it's important to you to be able to charge off of, solar energy. I'd like you to dive into why that matters to you, and then why you think it should matter to other people that maybe just don't know enough about it.
So, we all come to EVs and charging from different places. You're a car guy. Andrew gets free electricity. For me, being in the medical field, there's actually some really good studies that have come out, both back in 2018 and then more recently, that show that the number of deaths worldwide from particulate matter from fossil fuels is bigger than we thought, is greater than we thought. The inflammation that's caused by particulate matter from fossil fuel combustion contributes to significant cardiovascular and respiratory mortality. Worldwide, it's about 1 in 5 deaths can be linked to these fossil fuel particulates. There was a really good study done by Harvard here in conjunction with the University of Birmingham and the university, I think, I'm going to mispronounce this, Leicester and University College in London. And they find that the estimated exposure to particulate matter from fossil fuel emissions accounted for about 18% of global deaths. And so it's about 1 in 5 globally and about 1 in 10 in the Western world.
Wow.
So moving our energy consumption from fossil fuels, or diversifying at least to lower carbon intensity ones, is really important. In addition to the energy security concerns and, not wanting to support certain, petro states, and of course, concerns over climate change and such. And also, honestly, the other thing to look at is how much we subsidize fossil fuels. There's some reports I've seen that we spend about 10 times what we spend on education to subsidize the fossil fuel industry. Now, not all of that is, nefarious, backroom corporate back scratching or whatever it is. A lot of it is, industry depends on energy, and you want to make that cheaper so that you can, be competitive in a global marketplace. But again, those levels of subsidies for fossil fuels come at an enormous societal opportunity cost. What could you do with that money otherwise? We could spend more on education, for example. And so, for me, that was why it's so important to move to solar or wind or what have you. And with respect to EVs, in addition to them just being amazingly fun to drive, the amount, the miles you get, your carbon intensity per mile is so much lower. even when you're charging off of coal, your carbon intensity per mile is far lower. There was a study, I think you reported it, I can't remember, where they took the entire carbon intensity of a Model 3 compared to like a Toyota, I think it was
a Camry.
Or was it a Camry? And they said,
I'm trying to remember what it was.
If you charge on the US grid, you break, even though your carbon intensity of making the EV is a little bit higher than the internal combustion car, you break even at like 8,000 miles or 9,000 miles, and then after that, it's much greener. And so, so for me, moving over to EVs and renewables, solar, wind, what have you, was very important to me. And it's happening. One question I did have, so here is about using battery storage and bidirectional charging, which is interesting because the Ford F-150 Lightning apparently is capable of that.
Oh yeah.
And how you guys think battery storage will impact the adoption of solar and renewables, especially since it's poised to handle that intermittency, of renewables. Do you see yourself planning on using the F-150 to do bidirectional charging at all? Or
before you answer, Andrew, selfishly, I want to tell you what I would do. You're charging for free at work. You're filling this big battery with free to you electricity. I would take that home and I would plug the house into the truck and I'd power my house off of that. And I fully expect that people will do that because I'm not unique in my thoughts.
Right.
But you've only had it for a day, so I'm not sure maybe you had that thought, maybe you didn't, but I'll let you now.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting concept. Although I do charge at home, right? So my work doesn't have any charging. I work downtown, and I think there's very few chargers downtown San Antonio for whatever reason. But yeah, that I fully follow that train of thought. I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of people doing that. I personally didn't opt for the full home backup just because although we did have that winter storm in 2021, where I live, it's an extremely reliable grid. So, I mean, I was looking at some of the quotes people were getting to have people install that. And it was, I just couldn't justify the price for how stable our grid is in San Antonio.
That'd be like $4,000 or something to have that installed, right?
Yeah, 4 to, so I was even seeing like 6, and yeah. So what I did is I bought a couple of $20 extension cords, and if the power ever does go out, then I'll just plug an extension cord in and run my refrigerator and a portable AC unit. So I went the cheap route there, but it'll still work the same way.
That's funny. That's kind of what I am doing. When the power goes out here, I have a 2,000 watt inverter I hook up to the 12-volt battery on the car, and then I just turn the car on and leave it running. So the high voltage battery maintains the level of charge in the 12-volt, which then outputs to two electrical cords that I have running through, across the front lawn through the front door. So it's funny that you said that, because I'm like, your vehicle is designed to do that, which is just
you were way ahead of Ford.
Spectacular. Well, I mean, you do what you got to do, right? Like when the power goes out, my kids still need to play on the Xbox. Like it's just the way it works. But I'm curious with community solar, for people like that might not be capable of putting solar panels on their roof, and they do want to have some sort of battery backup. Is there any way, and I suspect the answer is no, but is there any way that if the grid does go down, that with community solar, they can still somehow power their home?
Yes and no. So it's actually separated from community solar. So earlier in the podcast, we talked about sort of a few pros and cons of rooftop solar versus community solar. So with community solar, it's not really a resiliency aspect. You don't have any backup power, right?
Right.
It's really financial and environmentally based. Whereas rooftop solar, you've got the solar panels on your roof, although if you don't do anything else, you just install the solar and tie it into your house. If the grid goes down, your solar panels also shut down.
Right.
So the inverters it's called anti-islanding, where if they don't sense anything from the grid, they shut down. Right. So you would have to install batteries or a generator. Being in the solar industry, I should probably be promoting batteries, but honestly, in San Antonio, it doesn't pencil out right now.
Right.
They're just so expensive for the amount of time you're going to use them. Whereas if you go to California, you've got time of use rates. So you've got this cheap electricity during the day, whereas at peak demand times, you may be paying a ton for electricity. So what people are doing are using their solar panels during the day to charge their batteries, or even their car battery, if you could figure out how to do it that way. And then at night, when the utility's charging them more for power, they deplete their batteries instead of buying the electricity. So in that situation, it makes financial sense to do battery backup.
Sure.
Whereas in San Antonio, we pay one rate all the time. So really it's a resiliency thing. And as I said, we have a stable grid. So it hasn't gotten to that point yet here to where I think it makes sense.
Right.
Rajeev, did you do battery backup on your house?
No, again, the cost of like a Tesla Powerwall, it costs, I think I looked at it once, just 20 kilowatt hours would cost more than my entire Chevy Bolt did, which has 60 kilowatt hours. So right. I don't fully understand. I think that it's coming. I think that it's one of those things to watch, and I think there's a point in time when it will get there. I was thinking more in terms of like, if you're trying to sell a community solar project you're trying to sell to a utility provider like CPS over here, you think they would have any appetite to say, hey, okay, we'll buy your solar, but also, we're, some battery backup alongside. I know that you had told me some time ago that the CPS was looking at I think a 900 megawatt request for proposal, along with I think 50 megawatt hours of battery backup. I think. Yeah,
50 megawatts. They said megawatts of battery backup. Yeah.
So I didn't know if there's something that you thought that might be to maybe add to that as a selling factor to the utility.
Well, whenever we built this first 5 megawatts, we made them all sort of storage ready. So whenever we were looking at the sites, we specifically designed them to where in the future, if it makes financial sense, we can add batteries to it. CPS CPS is, as I think I mentioned earlier, our municipally owned utility here. So it's the only option we have. They're actually doing a trial at I think it's SWERI, Southwest Research Institute, and they did I think it's a 5 megawatt solar farm with 5 megawatts of batteries, and so they're testing it out there, seeing does it make financial sense to install batteries with these big solar farms. So I think they're still testing it, we'll see what comes out of that, to where maybe we can add batteries to our community solar program.
I'm surprised they need to question that. Like, the answer is yes. I'm shocked constantly by the hesitancy by power providers when it comes to static battery storage, because like gas turbines, you can't turn them on and off efficiently or very easily at all. They have to constantly kind of be running. So like natural gas turbines, you can ramp it up for peak, but it's super expensive to turn them on or turn them off. So batteries make a huge difference to really just cut the peak off and even that out. I'm in shock when I don't hear a whole lot of conversation about that. I'm like, really? Like, even Vermont, I don't know if you guys knew this, the power provider up there, they bought Tesla Powerwalls for a bunch of their customers and had it tied in so that the utility was able to pull off of that battery storage at people's individual houses at peak times. And I mean, I don't know if that was a pilot program or what, but it seemed to be very successful. So I don't, maybe it's just we're early. I don't know. But it's like, it makes so much sense. Some of the bigger, massive utility scale projects that Tesla's had globally have saved the utility companies so much money. I don't know why they wouldn't be jumping at it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Tesla built what is it, they call it, a mega pack or whatever they call it. I think in Australia and somewhere in the Northeast, I believe. And so yeah, they saved them a lot of money. So I actually have a question for you then, Zach, because you're the battery expert, or more so than we are. So we hear all the time about how the EV world is battery supply constrained. And, even though the costs were coming down, we were all thinking, oh, once they get the cobalt out, the price will go down and the supply will go higher. But now that the cobalt is largely gone with the lithium iron phosphate cathode chemistries and, the other, cobalt sparing chemistries that Tesla has. But now the price of nickel and lithium has shot up, and with EVs increasing their becoming more commonplace and the demand for more batteries, that puts a crimp in the plans for adding battery backup to shore up intermittency from both wind and solar. In fact, I think I saw an article recently that suggested that that's a lot of battery backup programs were kind of delayed because of the supply issue. And so I was wondering, what did you think about maybe moving from, the standard, NMC cathode chemistry to perhaps some of the other ones that we're hearing about, like the sodium or even that vanadium flow thing, or even maybe non-battery, like pumped hydro or what have you, as a way to handle the intermittency that you see with renewables. Especially since what you need out of a battery backup for a utility is so much different than what you need with an EV, right? You don't need a high power density, super light, high C rating battery, right? You need something that can weigh a ton, and just as long as it lasts forever, you don't care.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, I'll make this as simple as possible because I don't want to dive too much into different battery chemistries, because you can get in the weeds for sure. Typically, you're right, Rajeev, for electric vehicles, weight and cost are the two most limiting factors when it comes to the batteries. Electric vehicle manufacturers want to design a battery that's going to provide the power and the range that they want for their vehicle. But I'll use the Hummer EV as a great example. They have this almost 10,000 pound vehicle. 2,000 pounds of that it is the battery pack. It's 210 something like that kilowatt hours just for one vehicle, for it to get an EPA rating of 400 miles of range. Well, that I see being a problem. And I see that being a big problem for the future of electric vehicles. It makes a lot more sense to have 4 50 kilowatt hour battery packs driving EVs than it does to have one 200 kilowatt hour battery pack. So cost, I mean, that's the reason why the Hummer costs over $100,000. I mean, it's just, that is a lot of material. Lithium and cobalt and nickel, those, you're right. I mean, those costs are going up because demand has sharply increased and supply hasn't been there to keep up. To answer your question about whether you think we're going to go towards something like a sodium battery? I don't think so. And the reason for that is there are a lot of EV manufacturers, like GM, I'll use as a great example. They are investing billions of dollars into lithium extraction. I forget the exact place. I think it's Nevada. It's a lake out there that they have been pulling lithium out, and they have a contract. I think it's like 5 years, but essentially the lithium is very abundant. It's just a matter of getting to it. And I think we're now going to start seeing so many more companies that are actually dedicated to that, one, to create virgin batteries, but then also with battery recycling. It's weird, and I don't understand the technical aspects of it, but a recycled lithium-ion battery that is essentially you take the old battery, take it apart, pull everything out of it, recycle it, and make a new battery out of that. The new battery performs better than the original one.
Really?
I don't know how that works. I should probably look into that sometime. But when you consider that battery recycling is going to be huge, we will reach a point where we do not need to pull any more minerals out of the ground. We have everything we need. We just need to recycle it and then go from there. The next few years, I don't think we're going to be there. So I think we're going to see, like Ford announced that the Mach-E is now not profitable for them because the increasing costs of everything in their supply chain. I really hope that's a temporary thing, where costs will go down as supply increases to keep up with demand. I think we'll see things level out, and the commitment and really what these guys have put into securing lithium, or like Tesla had a newish contract, I believe, in Indonesia, where they're getting nickel. They're reaching out and kind of trying to shore up their supply chains so that they can make sure they can get it. So I don't think we're going away from that, because they're putting way too much investment in that. Not to say that a sodium battery is bad. It's just it's somewhat newer, and there isn't a lot that's known. There isn't currently any commercial scale, manufacturing for sodium batteries, and it's almost like the Betamax versus VHS. Like, at a certain point, I think that we will see more of a standardization when it comes to EV batteries, just for the sake of keeping costs down. I think we're going to see more of that. Right now, the entire EV industry, and I don't know if solar industry is kind of the same way, but it's kind of like the wild, wild west, where everybody's just doing their own thing, trying to figure out what works. Tesla, even as a single company, is a great example of this, because they have multiple different types of battery chemistries and battery styles in their different vehicles. They're using the lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, chemistry batteries for their standard range vehicles now. But then you've got 2170, which is the dimensions of the cell, the cylindrical cell. But then you add in their newest Model Y that is actually coming out of the Texas Gigafactory. They're but I mean, the bigger, almost like a can style battery. Tesla evolves and changes things so rapidly to adjust to the current market. They maneuver very, very quickly. I think because they're so vertically integrated, where they're not relying on a lot of other suppliers, where a lot of other auto manufacturers move much more slowly. Toyota is a great example of that. They are a behemoth. They kind of just make little adjustments as they go along. And sometimes that puts them very behind. Like, they don't really have a strong full battery electric vehicle presence, but they will get there. I mean, the ship is starting to turn. When they finally start to reach mass production with the Lexus and Toyota vehicles, when Honda, with their partnership with GM and their newer partnership with Sony, start to make more and more electric vehicles, I do think we're going to see the costs go down. but I think that we're probably 5 years away from really that happening dramatically. Okay, my rant is over.
No, I just wondered how you guys thought would handle the short-term battery, or maybe not that short-term, battery supply, crunch,
I think it's gonna be tough. Demand is through the roof for EVs and solar and battery storage. I mean, people are waking up and realizing that there is a better way to do the things that we've always done. Supply is not going to keep up with that for years.
Right. I think a lot of it comes down to, it always used to be for solar and EVs, it was always an environmental conversation.
Right.
So you have the first people buying the electric vehicles and the first people buying solar, they had a ton of money majority of the time. And they were like, sweet, yeah, I'll do it for environmental reasons. But now solar specifically, it pencils out. You get a return on your investment. And then if you compare that with the EV, I mean, it just makes sense.
I couldn't have said it better. It just makes sense. Guys, we are running long, actually. I didn't realize it was. I've just been enjoying this so much. So last comment, I'll give it to both of you. Anything that you want to throw in to tie it all together?
Get solar, get an EV, and drive on sunshine. You won't regret it. You won't look back.
Completely agree. I'm happy you guys had me on here. Big fan of my EV 2 days in, so I'll keep you posted on how it's going. And thanks for everything, and I'll be listening to try and learn some more about the EV market.
All right, so I know it was a long one. I can't believe the time just flew by. It was a lot of great information that we discussed. So hopefully if you made it this far, you enjoyed it as well. As always, I appreciate your feedback via email to hello@ev-resource.com. Share the podcast with your friends, anybody that you might know that's interested in electric vehicles. Just a few quick kind of parting announcements. I do want to remind you all that the Electric Vehicle Fall Festival is taking place here in Virginia, September 18th. That's a Sunday. It's all day, one day only. You have a chance to drive your favorite electric vehicles if you don't currently own one. If you do currently own one, you can drive your EV around the 2-mile road course and 8th-mile drag strip without having to worry about, blue lights flashing behind you. You can drive basically the way you would want to if it were legal. So it's a great opportunity just to have a lot of fun. Tickets are on sale now. You can find the link to the Facebook page as well as the Eventbrite page to buy your tickets. Both of those are going to be in the show notes. And it's been 2 hours, so I'm just going to end it right there. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time.